A small hand clutched Luke Harrow's coat. The tiny music box in that hand clicked unevenly, metal teeth scraping like a frozen breath. He stopped. Snow hammered his back. The child didn't speak, just lifted the box again. Another brittle click, a broken hymn trying to rise. Luke knelt. Cold eyes met warmer ones. "Where's your people?" he asked. The child only pressed the box to his chest. Click, click, a pleading rhythm. And through the blizzard, faint as a lantern's last glow, someone began to sing. Luke Harrow felt the storm tightening around him like an old grudge. Snow hammered the ridge, wind scraped across the pines in a long, ragged moan. He leaned into it, working his way toward the cabin he called home, if only because no one else ever would. Then something tugged his coat. Not the wind, not a branch, a hand. Small, cold, desperate. Luke froze, breath fogging the dark. He looked down to see a boy no older than 7, wrapped in a threadbare coat, face chapped raw by the blizzard. The child's fingers clenched Luke's coat with the strength of someone who had nothing left but instinct. In the boy's other hand rested a music box. Tin, dented, its hinge nearly broken. The lid quivered in the wind, and the gears inside clicked in uneven spurts, metal teeth scraping as if trying to remember a song they once knew. Click, pause, click, click, a stuttering plea. Luke had heard a lot of sounds in the wild, but this one found a hollow inside him. It echoed the kind of silence a man collects when he's lived too long without a reason to speak. "You lost?" Luke asked. No answer. The boy's eyes were wide, wet, but not with tears. More like he'd used up his allotment of crying days ago. Another click from the box. The lid trembled, trying to rise on its own, trying to play, trying to reach something far away. Luke crouched to the boy's level. "Where's your people?" Nothing. The boy only lifted the box toward Luke, as if offering proof of something he couldn't say aloud. The wind cut between them, bitter, sharp enough to steal breath. Luke felt the old ache in his bones, the one that told him to walk away, keep moving, leave trouble where he found it. He'd built his life on stepping around the fallen and the lost. Others had done the same to him. It was the only law the world seemed to obey lately. But the boy's hand trembled. The clicking grew faster, jittered by shaking fingers. Luke sighed. "All right," he murmured. "Come on." He reached for the boy's shoulder, guiding him through the white roar. The child moved close, almost pressed against him, seeking warmth like a stray deciding on a final gamble. The cabin waited at the tree line, its door rattling in the wind. The chimney had long gone cold. The place wasn't made for company anymore. Yet as they approached, the music box clicked again, just once, soft, lonely, as though relieved. Luke pushed open the door. The boy stepped inside first, carrying the broken melody with him. The fire took its time waking. Luke knelt beside the stove, coaxing the flame like an old mule. Dry twigs snapped, settling into a low crackle, thin at first, then steady enough to push a small breath of warmth into the cabin. Evan stood near the doorway, music box clutched against his chest. His shoulders were tight. His eyes moved around the room as if expecting it to spit him back out. "Come closer," Luke said. The boy didn't move, so Luke stepped away from the stove and gave him room, hands open, nothing demanding in them. Fire's warmer than that corner. Evan inched forward, slow, careful. The music box clicked in his hand, one sharp, metallic tick that sounded too loud in the quiet. Luke nodded toward the table. "Sit, you look half frozen." Evan didn't sit. He hovered beside the chair, waiting for some signal Luke didn't know how to give. "Fine." Luke dropped into his own seat, boots thudding against the floorboards. He pulled a tin cup toward him, filled it with hot water from the kettle, and set it on the far side of the table. "Yours," he said. Evan hesitated. Then he climbed onto the chair like a cat testing uncertain ground. Steam drifted from the cup. He held his hands over it, letting warmth touch him without fully trusting it. The fire settled into a steady rhythm. The storm outside did not. Wind shoved at the cabin walls. Snow hissed against the window. The contrast made the interior feel too fragile, as if one good gust might peel the roof off and dump them back into the blizzard. Luke watched the boy warming his hands. Small hands, bruised knuckles, dirt under the nails. Long way from town, Luke said. A tiny shrug. Got a name? Evan's lips parted, then closed. He nodded once, as if telling himself yes. He did have one. Evan, he whispered. Luke repeated it under his breath. A name needed grounding. Saying it helped. The music box clicked again, a softer sound this time, like it had thawed a fraction in the boy's hands. "Where'd you get that thing?" Luke asked. Evan looked down at it. His thumb brushed the lid, but he didn't open it. "Mama's. Thought so." Luke leaned back. Old. Seen some miles. Evan kept staring at the box. Not with ownership, with duty. Another tick, a shudder in the gears. A half-swallowed attempt at melody. Luke felt it in his ribs. That broken tune had a way of slipping under the door of a man's defenses. A log popped in the stove, scattering sparks behind the grate. Evan flinched. Luke didn't move, didn't comment, just let the quiet settle again. "You can sleep here tonight. Storm's not letting up." Evan nodded, small and quick, like he feared the offer might vanish if examined too closely. Luke fetched a blanket from his cot, thin, but clean enough, and draped it over the other cot on the far wall. Evan watched every motion with wary eyes. "You rest there," Luke said. "I'll keep the fire going." Evan walked toward the cot, the music box pressed against his chest. When the wind howled, he stopped mid-step, head turning toward the window. A shadow flickered outside. Just a branch, Luke told himself. Just the storm playing tricks. But the boy's reaction lingered in the air like a bruise. Luke kept his voice steady. "Nothing's coming through that storm." Evan didn't look convinced. He crawled onto the cot and curled against the wall, blanket pulled tight. He still held the music box. Luke sat back at the table. The fire worked its warmth across the room, thinning the chill, but only in patches. Silence filled the rest. Minutes stretched. The storm pressed harder. The music box gave one lonely click before going still. Luke rubbed his hands together, watching the boy fight sleep. "You eaten anything lately?" A slow shake of the head. Luke stood, opened a small tin of beans, and set it on the stove. He didn't ask more questions. Questions pushed people away. Food drew them in. The beans warmed. A faint, comforting smell drifted across the cabin. Evan's eyes tracked it like a compass needle finding north. Luke handed him a bowl. Evan took it with both hands, careful not to spill a drop, careful not to set the music box down. He ate fast at first, then slowed when he realized no one was rushing him. Luke pretended not to watch. A low groan came from the roof, wind shifting the snow load. Evan froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Luke kept his voice calm. Roofs held through worse. Evan lowered the spoon and blinked, as if trying to believe the words. They finished eating. The storm kept punching at the walls. Every strike reminded Luke that someone had left this child out in it on purpose. The boy finally lay down, the blanket tucked under his chin. The music box rested beside him, one hand placed lightly over it. Luke added wood to the stove. The fire answered with a soft rush of heat. He sat at the table again, elbows on his knees, eyes drifting to the door. The storm was easing a little, but the danger hadn't. Something in the boy's silence pointed to trouble deeper than cold. A faint click broke the stillness. Evan had turned the music box key in his sleep. Just once, a reflex, a memory. The box answered with its uneven stumble of sound, struggling through half-formed notes, then falling quiet again. The boy breathed steadier. Luke felt the room shift. Not warm, not yet, but warming. Outside, the storm kept its watch. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Luke wasn't entirely alone. Morning crept into the cabin slow, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Luke stirred the stove back to life, nudging the embers until they gave a weak glow. The cold still clung to the corners, but the air wasn't biting anymore. It felt like a truce. Evan slept curled around the music box, one hand resting over it as if guarding a heartbeat. When the first log cracked in the stove, he jolted awake, eyes wide, fingers tightening on the box. "Easy," Luke said. The boy blinked at the room, remembering where he was. His shoulders eased a fraction. Luke handed him a tin cup of warm water. Start with that. Evan drank slowly, savoring the heat. The steam softened his face, taking a layer of fear off it. The fire popped again. Evan didn't flinch this time. Luke pushed the door open for a breath of fresh air. The cold rushed in, sharp, clean, claiming the space like a feral thing. Evan stiffened. Storms passed, Luke said. Quiet out there. The boy didn't look convinced, but he edged closer to the stove, letting the warmth hold him steady. They shared the quiet for a while, the kind that has weight to it, like stones placed carefully between two strangers. Luke set a small pan on the stove. Ever split kindling? Evan shook his head. Luke motioned him over. Time to learn something. The boy approached, hesitant but curious. Luke placed a small piece of wood on the stump, showed him how to hold the hatchet without losing fingers, then let him try. The first swing landed wrong, the blade glancing off. Evan winced. Try again, Luke said. Wrists steady. Second swing. Better. Clean break. The crack of the wood was sharp, echoing through the cabin like a proud little announcement. Evan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. They kept at it, slow and steady, the rhythm building between them. Crack, crack, crack. Each split was another stitch in the thin thread binding them together. A gust of wind found the cabin, rattling the shutters. Evan's shoulders rose, instinct tightening him into something small. Luke kept his tone calm. Wind's just wind. Evan nodded, but the fear didn't fade entirely. It never left for long. Luke set the kindling aside and wiped his hands on his trousers. Breakfast. He pulled out dried meat and a few potatoes, tossing them into a pan. The smell filled the room, simple, warm, enough to make the boy sit straighter. Evan ate with quiet gratitude. Small bites at first, then bigger ones when he realized the food wasn't going anywhere. Luke let him finish before speaking. Town's a few miles. Supplies are short. Need you to keep the fire alive while I'm gone. Evan's eyes went sharp with panic. Luke caught it. Not leaving right now. Later, when the sun's higher. Still, the boy's grip tightened on the music box. The gears inside shifted with that uneven click, 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 as if sensing his fear. Luke sat across from him. Someone after you? Evan looked down. The silence sharpened, like frost on a metal rail. Then he gave a tiny nod. Luke let the answer settle. Heavy, inevitable. Anyone who comes here, he said, they'll deal with me first. Evan stared at him for a long time, searching his face for something. Truth, maybe. Or the kind of lie that feels close enough to hold. He didn't speak, but his breathing steadied. Later, Luke stepped outside to chop larger logs. Evan stood in the doorway, blanket around his shoulders, watching him. The snow reflected the pale morning light, turning the world into a cold, harsh sheet of silver. Luke swung the axe. Wood split. The sound carried. Evan's gaze kept drifting toward the tree line. Luke noticed. Tracks? Evan shook his head. Not yet. The yet clung to the air. By midday, the cabin held real warmth. Evan sat on the floor near the stove, sorting wooden spoons and tin tools Luke hadn't touched in months. He arranged them neatly, lining them up with the precision of someone starved for order. Luke carved a new handle for the fire poker, letting curls of wood fall to the floor. The steady scrape of the knife and the low hum of the fire blended into something that felt almost peaceful. Then the music box clicked. Evan froze. Luke looked up. The lid had lifted just enough to catch the light, gears pushing against their own reluctance. Half a note wound out, a hint of a melody smothered by cold metal. Evan touched the lid gently, coaxing it closed again. It used to sound different. Luke said nothing. The boy's voice had a tremor, but not from the cold. Remembering hurt more. The hours drifted. Luke showed him how to sweep the hearth. Evan helped carry in wood. Small tasks built small trust. When the sun began to drop, shadows stretched across the snow outside. Luke glanced through the window. Storm cleared fast. Skies too quiet. Evan stiffened. His fingers found the music box again. Luke stepped closer. You're safe here. But even as he said it, he saw something near the tree line. Not movement, just the impression of something large having been there recently. A depth in the snow that didn't belong. Luke shut the curtain. Inside, the fire glowed strong. The cabin breathed warmth. Evan sat beside the stove, humming under his breath. Soft, halting, trying to follow the melody the music box once carried fully. Luke listened. Something in the sound reached him deeper than the warmth ever could. A boy humming a broken song in a half-lit cabin. A man who hadn't heard human music in years. The quiet stretched between them, no longer empty, no longer cold. And somewhere beyond the tree line, trouble kept its distance, for now. Dawn arrived thin and gray, barely pushing through the frost on the window. The cabin held the night's warmth, but only in pockets, like islands in a cold sea. Evan sat near the stove, music box beside him, waiting for the fire to rise enough to brave the morning. Luke stepped outside to check the traps. The air bit at his skin, sharp enough to make his eyes water. Snow shifted under his boots with a quiet crunch. Then he stopped. A set of footprints led toward the cabin from the tree line. Not his, not Evan's. Fresh, wide-strided, heavy. Luke crouched over them. The edges were crisp, not yet softened by wind. Whoever had been here watched the cabin. Maybe only for minutes, maybe longer. He followed the tracks until they vanished into brush, swallowed by the forest. A hunter, maybe, a drifter, or something worse. When Luke returned, Evan was stirring the fire, trying to mimic the way Luke did it. He glanced up quickly, searching Luke's face for a clue about the morning. Something wrong? Evan asked. Luke kept his voice steady. Someone came near the cabin last night. Evan's shoulders tensed. His hand moved to the music box, fingers tightening over the lid. You know who? Luke asked. Evan shook his head, but his eyes said otherwise. Luke let it pass. Not everything needed to be forced out of a child's throat. The fire grew stronger. The room warmed. The boy eased slightly. Still, the image of those footprints stayed in Luke's thoughts like a nail working deeper. By midday, Luke saddled his horse to ride into town. Supplies were low, and he needed information. Evan stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around himself, not the music box this time, just his own ribs, like he needed to hold himself together. I'll be back before night, Luke said. Evan nodded, but didn't step aside. Luke knelt and met his eyes. You'll be safe inside. Keep the fire alive. You hear anything strange, you stay low. Evan whispered, how strange? Luke paused. You'll know. The boy swallowed hard and stepped back. The ride to town was quiet. The snow glittered under a pale sun, but the cold clung stubbornly to the air. A reminder that weather could change faster than men. At the general store, Luke bought flour, beans, and coffee. Routine, simple, but the room's hush grew thick when the owner leaned in close. You heard? The owner asked. Heard what? Big man came through. Dalton Briggs, looking for a boy. Luke felt the room shrink. What boy? The owner lowered his voice. Said the kid stole from him. Wandered off. Offered money for anyone who sees him. Luke kept still, breath tight. Described the kid. Small, dark hair, thin, about 7. The owner squinted. Sound familiar? Luke shook his head. Not to me. But the lie weighed heavy, like a cold hand pressed against the back of his neck. He paid, loaded the supplies, and rode back as fast as the trail allowed. The sky was turning colorless again, the kind of light that warns of a storm thinking about. When he reached his cabin, he saw it immediately. Another footprint, closer to the door, larger than his. The snow around it unsettled, as if the person had paused, listening. Luke opened the door fast. Evan was crouched beside the stove, clutching the poker like a spear. His eyes were wide but alert. You saw someone? Luke asked. Evan nodded. At the window. Luke's stomach nodded. How long ago? Evan held up 2 fingers. Maybe that long. 2 minutes. Maybe less. Luke checked the windows. The frost on the glass had melted in one spot, as if someone had breathed on it. He stoked the fire, needing the warmth as much as the light. The room felt small now, like the walls had leaned in. Evan sat beside the cot, music box on his lap. He turned the key absent-mindedly. A single note chirped out, broken, lonely, like a bird calling in the wrong season. Luke sat across from him. That man looking for you. He got a name? Evan's throat worked. He whispered, Briggs. The room seemed to cool despite the fire. Luke leaned closer. "Why's he after you?" Evan shook his head, pressed the music box to his chest. "Mama said run." Luke absorbed the words slowly. His breath came rough. The fire crackled, filling the space with its soft growl. A soft knock rattled the cabin door. Evan froze. Luke's hand went to his rifle, but the knock didn't return. Only wind rubbed against the boards, making them groan. Luke waited until the silence settled again. "Stay away from the windows," he said. Evan nodded, small and tight. Luke placed another log on the fire. Sparks rose, bright against the dimming room. Outside, fading footprints trailed toward the woods. Inside, the warmth struggled against the cold creeping back in. And the music box gave one last faint click, half warning, half prayer. Snow fell in slow, wandering flakes the next morning, drifting like ash over the clearing. Luke stood on the porch with his coffee, steam rising into the cold air. The quiet felt wrong, like the world was inhaling and refusing to exhale. Evan sat inside by the stove, humming softly, the music box resting near his knee. Each time his voice faltered, the box answered with its uneven click, 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 a reminder of something unfinished between them. Luke's eyes scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but the feeling of being watched clung to him like frost to a window. He stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. "We're headed to town," he said. Evan looked up, stiffening. "Will he be there?" "Don't know," Luke said. "But we need information. Supplies. Word travels faster than horses." Evan didn't argue, but he held the music box like a shield. The trail into town was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no rabbits darting between trees. Even the wind seemed to avoid this stretch of woods. Luke kept one hand near his rifle. Evan rode behind him, arms around Luke's waist, pressing close to stay warm. At the edge of town, Luke spotted 3 men gathered near the saloon's hitching post. Their coats were too fine, their boots too polished. Their eyes followed everything that moved. Luke kept his distance. Inside the general store, the warmth was thick, almost welcoming. The smell of coffee and leather hung in the air, but the owner's face tightened when he saw Luke. "He's here," the owner whispered. Luke didn't need the name yet. His gut already knew. Evan stood behind him, half hidden, knuckles wide on the music box. The door creaked. Heavy boots crossed the boards. A presence filled the space like a storm cloud forming indoors. Luke turned slightly. Dalton Briggs entered with a slow, deliberate stride. A big man, chest like a furnace door, jaw carved out of bad intentions. His coat was trimmed in fur, his gloves spotless, his eyes pale enough to look unfinished. He smiled, but only with his teeth. "Morning, Harrow." Luke didn't answer, didn't give him the satisfaction. Briggs turned his gaze toward the small shape behind Luke. "That your boy?" Luke felt Evan press closer. "No," Luke said. Briggs stepped forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. "Funny thing, I'm missing one. Size of him." He tapped his boot twice on the floor, a slow, rhythmic thump meant to pin the room in place. "Strange world, isn't it?" Evan trembled. The music box clicked softly, the gears inside shifting like a nervous heart. Briggs' eyes flicked toward the sound. "There it is. Recognize that anywhere." Luke stiffened. "Leave him be." Briggs tilted his head. "I will, once he's returned." His voice lowered into something smooth and poisonous. "Man can own a lot in this world, hero. Land, stock, futures." A cruel pause. "Children, too." Luke felt heat rise in his chest. Briggs went on, pretending this was all polite business. He ran off with something of value. Should have kept a closer eye on him. Luke didn't bite. "What value?" Briggs smiled wider. "Doesn't matter. What matters is he's mine. And the law says." "Law doesn't work out here the way you think," Luke said. The store fell silent. Even the stove seemed to hold its breath. Briggs stared at him, a long, cold stare that stripped the warmth right out of the room. "You're making a mistake, Harrow." Luke met his gaze. Done that before. Survived most of them. Briggs chuckled once, low, humorless. Then he leaned down until his face was inches from Evan's. The boy froze. The music box clicked again, rapid and frightened. "You remember me, boy?" Briggs murmured. Evan didn't blink, didn't breathe, only pressed the box harder against his chest. Briggs straightened and turned to Luke. 2 days, he said. I'll come collect, with papers. A man like me always has papers. His smile sharpened. You best read him careful. Luke's jaw tightened. If you come near my cabin. Briggs raised a hand. Threats? Really? He stepped back toward the door. No need, I'm a patient man. He stopped at the threshold. Snowflakes drifted in behind him, settling on his coat like tiny white warnings. I always get what's mine, hero. Then he walked out, boots thudding in a slow, heavy beat that echoed long after he vanished into the street. Luke exhaled through his teeth. Heat pooled behind his ribs, fighting the town's winter air. The store owner whispered, "You shouldn't cross him." Luke didn't look away from the door. He crossed me first. As they rode home, the woods felt darker. The lingering warmth from the cabin seemed far away. Evan's grip around Luke's waist was tighter now, not just for warmth, but fear. When the cabin came into view, Luke noticed something at once. The door was ajar. Evan gasped. Luke dismounted slowly, rifle in hand, breath turning sharp in the cold air. Inside, the cabin was empty, untouched, but the curtain by the window swayed slightly. Someone had been inside, recently. Evan stepped in behind him, clutching the music box. The gears clicked once, just once, a sound like a warning from a frightened heart. Luke closed the door. Winter pressed close around them, and Dalton Briggs' shadow stretched far longer than any man's had a right to. Snow drifted past the cabin windows in slow, wandering spirals, catching what little light the day bothered to offer. Luke worked the stove with a calm he didn't feel, placing logs in careful order to keep the warmth steady. Evan hovered close, the music box held tight, as if the fire itself might turn cold without it. The cabin door rattled once. A loose hinge, maybe, or a reminder. Luke's eyes shifted to it. Evan followed his gaze, shrinking a little into his blanket. "Eat," Luke said quietly, nudging a bowl of stew toward him. Evan obeyed, but his eyes kept jumping to the door between bites, flinching at each wood groan of the walls. Outside, the wind swept across the clearing with a low hiss, the sound sliding beneath the cabin like a warning. Luke pulled his coat from the peg. "Stay inside. Don't open that door for anyone." Evan's breath caught. "You're going out?" "Just checking the fence line," Luke said. "Won't be long." The boy didn't look convinced. Still, he nodded, pressing the music box to his chest like a shield. Outside, the cold clamped onto Luke's skin with the certainty of iron. He walked the perimeter, boots crunching through crusted snow. Every so often, he paused and glanced toward the trees. The forest stared back. Halfway around the cabin, he stopped dead. A boot print, deep, heavy, fresh. Briggs or one of his men. Luke followed the tracks until they veered off toward the northern slope, then vanished beneath a scatter of windblown snow. Whoever left them hadn't been sneaking. They'd been watching. When he returned, Evan was standing by the door, as if pulled there by instinct or fear. His eyes widened when he saw Luke, relief washing across his face like thawed water. "You're back," Evan whispered. Didn't go far. Luke brushed snow from his coat and stepped inside. Then came the knock. Hard, sharp, authority wrapped in leather gloves. Evan jumped, nearly dropping the music box. The gears inside clicked in a frantic stutter. Luke rested a hand on his rifle. "Get behind the table." The boy obeyed, slipping into the shadow of the stove. Luke opened the door. Dalton Briggs filled the doorway like a wall. 2 men flanked him, their breath steaming in the cold. Briggs' coat was dusted with snow, his boots polished, as if he'd dressed for a meeting rather than a confrontation. "Mornin', Harrow," Briggs said. "Thought we'd settle business proper." Luke didn't step aside. "You're not welcome here." Briggs smiled thinly. "Won't take much of your time." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a stack of papers tied with string. "Legal documentation. My claim." Luke didn't touch them. "Claim on what?" Briggs raised a brow. "On the boy, on my property." Luke's jaw tightened. "You don't own him." Briggs clicked his tongue. "World don't run on what we wish were true. Runs on signatures, seals, contracts. All right here." He lifted the papers slowly, letting the cold wind flick their edges. Bought fare from his mother. From behind the stove, a small gasp slipped out. Briggs' gaze snapped toward it. Luke stepped into his line of sight. "You need to leave." Briggs held the papers out like a sword turned sideways. "You refusing to acknowledge a lawful claim?" Luke didn't blink. "I'm refusing you." The smile faded. Briggs' voice lowered. "This boy cost me money. And time. He's coming home with me." Luke felt the heat of the stove at his back, the cold of Briggs' men in front. The cabin became a tight box, pressure blooming in the small space between choices. "You can leave on your horse," Luke said quietly, "or on your back." Briggs' men shifted, hands drifting toward their holsters. Evan's breath trembled audibly from behind the table, breaking the silence like cracked ice. Briggs didn't draw, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he tucked the papers back into his coat with surgical calm. "One day, Harrow. That's all I'm giving you." He leaned in, breath cold as the wind outside. "Bring him to town tomorrow, noon, or I come take him myself." Luke didn't move. Briggs stepped back, snow crunching beneath his boots. "You think you're doing him a kindness," he said. "You're not. The world's cruel. I just make sure it pays." He turned, coat sweeping behind him, and walked toward his horse. His men followed, silent and heavy. Luke watched them ride off until they vanished past the tree line. Only when the last hoofbeat faded did he close the door. Inside, Evan stood shaking beside the stove. The music box clutched so tight his knuckles were pale. The gears clicked once, soft, wounded, barely a sound at all. Luke knelt beside him. "He won't take you." Evan's voice came thin and small. "He always does." Luke wrapped a blanket around the boy's shoulders and moved him closer to the fire. Warmth met shaking, silence met fear. The cold outside seemed to press against the windows, waiting, and in the small cabin, the only sound was the faint, broken click of the music box, counting down something neither of them wanted to face. Snow stacked higher around the cabin by morning, drifting into soft ridges that looked harmless until you tried to walk through them. The air was still, too still, as if the world had paused to listen for something. Luke stepped onto the porch, breath rising in white curls, eyes sweeping the tree line for movement. Nothing but quiet. Quiet always arrived first, before trouble showed its teeth. Inside, Evan sat wrapped in 2 blankets near the stove. The music box rested in his lap, its metal surface frosting around the edges. He turned the key gently, almost absently, and the gears gave a thin, uneven click that sounded like a shiver. Luke stepped back in. "Eat something," he said, shaking off the cold. Evan shook his head. "Not hungry." Luke set a bowl beside him anyway. "Try." The boy picked at it, spoon trembling each time the wind pushed against the walls. The sound wasn't loud, just a soft, hollow thud, but it made Evan flinch every time. Luke checked the windows. Frost had thickened overnight, climbing the glass like a creeping vine. The world outside blurred into white shapes and shadows. Evan whispered, "He's coming." Luke kept his voice low, steady. "Not yet." But the truth carried a different weight. Briggs had given him until noon. Noon meant the rest of the day belonged to danger. Luke added more wood to the stove. The fire crackled loud, throwing heat into the room. It should have been a comfort, but the noise only seemed to underline how quiet everything else was. They worked through the morning chores together. Evan helped grind coffee beans, the small rhythmic crunch lending a fragile heartbeat to the room. Luke chopped vegetables, blade tapping the board with a crisp rhythm. Normal tasks, familiar motions, but every few minutes, Evan's gaze darted toward the door. Luke followed at once and found his own breath slowing. Footprints marked the snow beyond the porch, several sets, spaced evenly, looping around the cabin like a patient predator's circle. Fresh, not there last night. Inside, Luke said, voice dropping to something harder. Now. Evan scrambled back to the stove. The music box clicked again, faster this time, the gears jittering with the speed of his breath. Luke latched the door and pulled the curtains tight. The room dimmed to firelight and shadow. Wind pushed against the cabin once more, but it wasn't the same. This time, the push had weight, a deliberate press, like someone leaning a shoulder against the wood. Evan squeezed the music box. That's them. Luke kept his hand on the rifle. Don't assume. But the boy's instinct had been right too many times already. A soft creak traveled along the porch boards. Then another. Slow footsteps. Heavy. Testing. Luke stepped beside the window, staying to the side to avoid the line of sight. A shadow passed the frosted glass. Broad shoulders. Hat brim. Briggs, or one of his men. The footsteps paused. Silence stretched thin. Then a low whistle drifted through the cold. 3 notes, spaced apart, lazy and cruel. The kind of whistle a man used when he wanted his presence known. Evan whimpered and shoved the music box under his blanket. Luke moved closer to him, not touching, but anchoring the space with his presence. The whistle ended. The footsteps moved away. Snow crunched. Leather creaked. More than one man out there. Luke waited until the sound faded. "We stay put," he said. "Noon comes. Then they'll make their move." Evan nodded, though fear tightened every inch of him. Luke prepared the cabin the only way he knew how. Curtains drawn, rifle loaded, extra logs by the stove. Not fortifying against bullets, fortifying against fear. Warmth mattered. Warmth kept the mind steady. Evan watched him with wide, glassy eyes. "Do you think?" A sudden thump hit the back wall. Hard. Wood shuddered. Dust fell from the rafters. Evan gasped. Luke swung toward the sound, rifle raised. Another thump followed. Something, or someone, testing the cabin's weak points. He stepped toward the back room quietly, boots whispering across the floor. The thumping stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Then the doorknob rattled. Not the front, not the side, the back door. The one Luke almost never used. Evan's voice broke from the main room. "Luke, I see it," Luke said. The rattling continued for a moment, then stopped. A long breath of cold air slid under the door, as if someone exhaled against it. Luke stepped back into the main room. Evan huddled near the fire, blanket around his shoulders, tears he refused to shed shining in his eyes. Luke sat beside him. "They're trying to scare us." "It's working," Evan whispered. Luke didn't deny it. Fear had its place. It warned. It sharpened. But it couldn't decide. He rested a hand on the floor, near the boy, steady and unmoving. The fire snapped, sending a warm flare of orange light across the room. For a moment, the noise of the flames drowned the world outside. Then came the final reminder. A voice from the trees. Distant, muffled by snow, but unmistakable. Deep, confident. "Hero, noon's coming." Evan buried his face in his blanket. Luke stared at the door, jaw set. Warmth fought cold, fire fought silence, and fear settled into the cabin like a third occupant, refusing to leave. Noon arrived without sunlight. Just a pale, bruised sky and a cold so sharp it felt like the world was holding its breath. Luke stood in the cabin doorway, coat pulled tight, rifle slung low but ready. The fire behind him murmured its last comfort into the room, casting a warm glow that didn't reach far enough. Evan stood near the stove, music box clutched in both hands, eyes too old for his face. "You stay inside," Luke said. Evan shook his head, fear twisting his voice small. "He'll take me if you go out there." Luke held his gaze. "He won't, not while I'm breathing." Outside, snow crunched, slow, heavy, measured. Dalton Briggs emerged from the tree line, riding a black gelding that snorted steam into the bitter air. 2 riders flanked him, rifles across their saddles. They looked like statues carved from winter itself. Briggs dismounted with a practiced swagger, boots punching deep holes in the snow. When he smiled, the cold seemed to tighten. "Harrow," he called, "time's up." Luke stepped out, closing the door behind him. "You don't belong here." Briggs spread his arms as if greeting a congregation. "Law says otherwise." He motioned to one of his men. The man tossed a rolled set of documents into the snow by Luke's boots. Papers, signed, stamped, everything proper. Luke didn't look down. Forgery travels faster than truth. Briggs' smile sharpened. Truth is whatever a rich man can afford. Luke's jaw flexed. "This ends today." Briggs nodded once, agreed. The woods fell silent around them. Even the wind seemed to crouch low, waiting. Luke reached slowly into his coat, not for his gun, but for the object hidden inside. The totem, Evan's music box. Earlier, the boy had shown Luke a compartment under the lining, a spot worn soft by years of turning. Luke had found something folded there, something jagged with truth. He held the papers up now. Evan's mother's handwriting scrolled across the page. "You bought nothing, Briggs." She named a guardian, and it sure as hell wasn't you. Briggs froze. Luke stepped closer. "You forged a bill of sale. But this," he lifted the letter higher, "this makes you a thief hiding behind ink." Briggs' men shifted uneasily. One spat into the snow. "Boss, you said she signed him over." Briggs shot him a glare. "Shut it." Luke's voice stayed level. "She didn't sell her son. She protected him. From you." Briggs lunged forward, ripping the letter from Luke's hand and shredding it into the wind. "Paper means nothing." His voice cracked with rage. "The boy is mine." Luke reached for his rifle. "Not anymore." Briggs roared and drew his pistol, the metal flashing a dull burst of white in the frozen air. His men hesitated, caught between fear, doubt, and the sudden collapse of certainty. Luke fired first. A deafening crack split the silence, echoing across the clearing. Briggs staggered back, hand pressed to his shoulder, fury twisting his face into something monstrous. "Kill him," Briggs shouted. The riders raised their rifles. Luke dove behind the woodpile, snow exploding around him as bullets cut the air. Powder smoke hung like gray breath over the clearing. Each shot rattled through the trees, shaking snow loose in soft, ghostly plumes. Inside the cabin, Evan cried out. Luke's blood surged cold. "Stay low," he yelled. He levered another round into the chamber and fired back, catching one rider in the leg. The man dropped with a curse, clutching the wound as his horse bolted into the brush. The second rider flanked left, trying to get a shot through the window. Luke sprinted across the clearing, boots slipping, lungs burning with the cold. He slammed into the rider before he could aim, knocking him from the saddle. The two hit the ground hard, snow swallowing the sound. They grappled, fists sinking into powder, breath ragged. Luke elbowed the man across the jaw, then wrested the rifle free. The man crawled backward, hands raised. "Don't," he gasped. "I ain't dying for Briggs." Luke let him run, which left only Dalton. Briggs stood near the porch, pistol aimed at the door. "Boy," he shouted, "come out now, or I burn this place down." Evan's terrified sob reached Luke's ears through the cabin wall. Luke stepped out, rifle raised. "Your fight's with me." Briggs spun, firing wildly, rage blinding him. Luke squeezed the trigger once. Briggs dropped to one knee, gun falling from his hand, breath fogging the air in broken bursts. "You," Briggs spat blood into the snow. "You think you saved him?" Luke walked closer. "I know I did." Briggs collapsed forward, face hitting the snow with a dull, final thud. His breath stilled. The woods swallowed the silence. For a moment, the world held still. Then the cabin door flew open. Evan ran out barefoot, snow biting his skin, music box clutched to his chest. He collided with Luke's coat, arms locked tight around him. Luke held him, breath rough, heart pounding like it wanted out of his ribs. "It's over," he said, voice cracked but certain. "No one's taking you." A faint click sounded between them. The music box had opened in the scuffle. The gears pressed forward, trembling, and a soft, wavering note rose into the frozen air. Broken, but alive. Evan tucked his face against Luke's coat, and for the first time since winter began, the cold backed away. Snow settled over the clearing in slow, drifting breaths, softening the violence that had shaken it only minutes before. The silence afterward felt brittle, like the air itself didn't trust peace to last. Luke stood there breathing hard, rifle lowered, boots sinking into fresh drifts. Evan clung to his coat with both arms, the music box pressed between them like a fragile heartbeat caught in a storm. Luke placed a steady hand on the boy's back. "Inside," he said, "we've got things to sort." Evan looked at Briggs' still form in the snow. He didn't move closer, didn't look long, just gave a tiny nod and followed Luke into the cabin. Warmth met them first, weak, uneven, but alive. The stove's fire had survived the gunshots, crackling with a tired groan. Luke shut the door behind them and set the rifle aside. Evan crawled onto the cot, blanket pulled over his shoulders, shivering not from cold but from everything else. Luke crouched beside him. "You hurt?" Evan shook his head, just scared. Luke breathed out, slow, heavy. "You did good, staying low, staying inside." The boy nodded, though he kept his eyes fixed on the music box. His thumb moved over the lid as if trying to feel the memory of a melody it no longer knew how to give. Luke tapped the small secret compartment. "You showed this to me once," he said. "Now you're going to show me again." Evan hesitated. His throat bobbed. "Mama said only when it was safe." "Seems like it's earned." Luke's voice softened without losing firmness. "Go on." Evan opened the compartment with trembling fingers. A folded slip of paper lay inside, the edges worn thin, the ink faded like something that had survived rain, tears, and too much time. He handed it to Luke. Luke unfolded it slow, careful not to tear what remained. The writing inside wavered in places, as if the hand that held the pen had been shaking. His eyes moved across the page, line by line, the fire throwing a warm flicker over the words. Evan watched him with wide, uncertain eyes. Luke read once, then again, and the weight of everything he had run from, everything he had lost, came back in a single breath. "Luke," Evan whispered. Luke swallowed. The paper shook in his hand. "She knew me," he said. "Your mother. She knew me a long time ago." Evan blinked. "You knew her?" Luke sat down on the edge of the cot. "I knew her brother. We served together in the war. She'd visit the camp sometimes, bringing letters, food, whatever she could. She told stories better than any preacher trying to fix the world." Evan listened, leaning closer. Luke's voice turned rough. "I was supposed to visit her after the war. Promise I made your uncle before he died." He looked down at the letter. "I didn't keep it." Evan's fingers closed around the music box. "Mama said you were a good man." Luke breathed in hard at that. Something in his chest tightened. A knot formed from regret and gratitude and grief all twisted together. He handed the letter back and pointed to the final lines. "She wrote you belong with me. Not with Briggs, not with the law. With me." Evan's lower lip quivered. "She told me to run to the mountains. To find the quiet cowboy with the broken past. That's what she called you." Luke choked on something like a laugh. "She always did talk prettier than reality." Evan leaned against him. Just a small weight, just enough to break open something Luke had kept shut for years. But the quiet didn't last long. A low groan shuddered from the roof. Snow shifting, pressure settling. The cabin trembled faintly, reminding them the world outside hadn't thawed. Luke rose and checked the windows. No movement, no shadows, no riders returning to test their luck. Still, the silence held a question, a danger half buried under the snow. Luke returned to the table and unfolded the letter again. The fire's glow made the ink shimmer. Evan sat close, clutching his music box with the reverence of someone holding the last warm thing in the world. The letter wasn't long, but every word carried weight. She wrote about Briggs, about the lies he told, about the debt he claimed she owed, how he tried to buy Evan, how she refused, and how she feared she wouldn't survive long enough to protect him. Luke ran a thumb over the signature. "She trusted me," he murmured. "After all these years." Evan looked up. "She said you knew how to save people." Luke shook his head slowly. "Not always." The boy's voice came quiet. "Certain, you saved me." Before Luke could answer, a sudden sharp crack echoed outside, wood splitting under weight. The roof groaned again, louder. Evan jumped, clutching Luke's coat. "It's just snow," Luke said. "Nothing more." But he kept his rifle nearby anyway. He stoked the fire, adding more heat to push the cold back. The flames rose, throwing orange lines across the walls, turning shadows into something gentler. Evan watched the flames dance, the broken music box resting in his lap. He twisted the key once, and a trembling note escaped, thin, half-formed, reaching for a tune it could no longer find. Then something unexpected happened. Evan began humming, soft at first, barely more than breath, but the melody found shape, notes rising and falling in the rhythm of something learned long ago. Luke froze. "That's the song," Luke whispered. Evan nodded. "Mama sang it to me every night." The music box clicked again, almost in time with Evan's humming. A broken echo, a wounded duet. Luke closed his eyes, letting the sound settle into him. Grief stirred, gratitude too. The cabin felt heavier and lighter at the same time. When the melody faded, Luke opened the compartment under the music box again. Something else glinted inside, something he hadn't noticed earlier. A tiny metal screw, loose, dislodged. The mechanism wasn't shattered, just incomplete. He picked it up, weighing it in his fingers. "Kid, this thing isn't broken beyond fixing. Just needs its pieces put back where they belong." Evan looked at him with a quiet, fragile hope. "You can fix it?" Luke nodded. "Not tonight, but soon." Evan breathed out, shaking a little. "Mama said it would play again when we were safe." Luke's chest tightened. She wasn't wrong. A soft thump hit the cabin roof. Snow sliding, nothing more, but still it made Evan flinch. Luke drew him closer. "He's gone. Briggs won't hurt you again." "But what if someone else comes?" Evan whispered. Luke looked around the small cabin. Fire burning, warmth rising, the air thick with the scent of wood and stew. A place that had been empty for years now holding life. "They'll meet me first," he said. Evan rested his head against Luke's arm. "I don't want to run anymore." "You won't." The fire cracked loudly, a warm burst of orange filling the room. Evan's eyes fluttered, exhaustion closing in now that the danger had passed. Luke let him drift off on the cot, music box resting beside him. The tiny screw glinted in Luke's palm like a seed waiting for spring. Outside, snow fell again, slow, quiet, peaceful. Inside, the silence was no longer frightening. It was full. Luke sat beside the boy, letter on the table, rifle within reach, and the music box's broken melody settling into his bones. The truth had been revealed. A mother's last wish, a boy's last hope, a man's long-delayed purpose. And somewhere deep inside the tiny music box, a song waited to be whole again. Snow thinned as winter loosened its grip on the mountains, revealing patches of stubborn earth beneath the melt. The air still carried cold, but not the sharp kind that bit down to the bone. This cold wandered gently, almost reluctant to leave. Luke stepped onto the porch in the early light, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Steam drifted upward, mixing with the faint breath of dawn. Inside, Evan slept curled on the cot, the repaired music box resting beside him. Luke had finished it the night before, piecing the mechanism together with patient hands in a kind of reverence he didn't know he still possessed. The gears had caught at first, hesitant, like a memory returning from far away. Now the box sat quiet, waiting, a promise stitched back together. Luke sipped his coffee. The stillness felt different today, not threatening, not hollow, just still. A small sound reached him, soft footsteps across the wood floor. Evan appeared at the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he murmured. Luke nodded. "Come on out. Sun's up." Evan stepped onto the porch, blanket draped over his shoulders. His breath puffed into the air in tiny clouds. "Feels warmer. Spring's coming." Luke watched the horizon. Finally, Evan stood beside him in silence, letting the quiet settle around them. Not the frightened silence of months past. This one was gentle, safe, the kind of silence you could build a life in. Luke glanced down. Music boxes fixed. Evan's face lit up in a way Luke hadn't seen yet, not fully. "Can we play it?" "Inside," Luke said. "Don't want the cold messing with the gears." They returned to the cabin. Luke lifted the music box carefully and set it on the table. Evan sat across from him, hands folded in his lap as if preparing for a ceremony. "You ready?" Luke asked. Evan nodded. Luke turned the key. The first note trembled out, thin as dawn frost. Another followed, clearer this time. Then the melody unfurled, slow and steady, a soft ribbon of sound drifting through the cabin. It wasn't perfect. A few notes wavered, catching where the metal had worn thin. But it was whole. After all this time, it was whole. Evan's eyes shone. "That's it," he whispered. "That's Mama's song." Luke let the music fill the space between them. The fire murmured in the stove. The cabin breathed warmth, and the melody, fragile, persistent, felt like something blooming in the middle of winter. Evan placed his palm on the table, feeling the vibration through the wood. She said it would only play again when we were safe. Luke swallowed around the knot in his throat. Then she'd be glad to hear it now. For a moment, neither spoke. The music carried them, but peace always held shadows of the past. As the melody reached its final notes, Evan's expression faltered. "What if someone else comes?" he asked quietly. "They won't," Luke said. "Not for you. But what if they do?" Luke leaned forward, voice steady. "Then we handle it, together." Evan stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The fear didn't vanish, but it eased, replaced by something sturdier. The music box clicked to a stop. Silence followed, warm, not empty. Luke stood. "Come on, we've got chores." Evan grinned. "Chores? Life doesn't slow down just because the world tried to end," Luke said. They stepped outside. Snow melted in thin rivulets along the cabin's edges. Birds hopped along the branches, shaking the drips free. The air smelled faintly of pine and thawing earth. Luke handed Evan a small rake. "We clear the path first." Evan attacked the snow with small, determined strokes. Luke shoveled beside him, carving a wider trail toward the shed. Light filtered through the branches, dappling the snow with spots of gold. They worked in companionable silence until Evan paused, looking toward the tree line. Luke followed his gaze. A shape moved, just a deer, head down, ears flicking. It walked slowly across the clearing, unconcerned. A good sign. Animals didn't pass through when danger lingered. Evan smiled. "Pretty." Luke nodded. Means we're finally left alone. They finished clearing the path and moved to the shed. Luke opened the door, letting the scent of old wood and oil spill out. Evan wrinkled his nose. "Smells funny." "Smells like work," Luke said. "Grab that small saw." Evan lifted it carefully. "What are we building?" Luke didn't answer. "Not yet." They gathered wood, planed the edges, cut the lengths. The rhythm settled between them. Scrape, cut, lift, measure. Every so often, a small gust of wind pushed through the clearing, sending loose snow twirling. But the wind carried no threat now, just reminders of the season they were leaving behind. Evan watched as Luke fitted the final pieces together. "What is it?" Luke stepped back, brushing sawdust from his hands. "A chair." Evan tilted his head. "For who?" Luke nodded at him. "You." Figured the cabin could use another seat. Evan ran his fingers along the smooth wood, touching each joint as if memorizing the craftsmanship. "I've never had my own chair before." "You do now." Evan sat down slowly, feeling the way it held him. The smile that broke across his face warmed the entire shed. Luke felt something shift inside him, something old, long buried, beginning to thaw. They carried the chair into the cabin. Luke set it near the table, right beside the cot. Evan placed the music box on the shelf above it, careful and proud. Luke added another log to the stove. The fire responded with a low roar, casting a growing warmth across the room. Evan looked around. "Feels like home." Luke paused. The words hung in the air, gentle but powerful. He nodded once. "Yeah, it does." As dusk approached, the world outside softened to lavender and gold. Evan hummed the lullaby while Luke cooked a simple meal. The repaired music box rested nearby, quiet now, but not silent in spirit. When they sat down to eat, Evan glanced at Luke. Can I stay here? Always?" Luke's breath caught. He set his spoon down and leaned forward. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "You're home, as long as you want it." Evan exhaled, a long, shaky breath that sounded like years of fear finally loosening. Later that evening, they stepped onto the porch again. The sky burned with sunset, streaked in pink and gold, melting the last hints of storm gray. Luke took the music box and turned the key once. The melody rose, clearer this time, fuller, drifting out into the soft air. Evan leaned against him, small and warm. Luke rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. The mountains held the sound gently, as if recognizing an old tune after too long a silence. Warmth against cold, music against quiet, life against the long shadow of winter. And the melody, no longer broken, carried them into the first peaceful night either of them had known in a very long time. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, Every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.